just, are we starting off with Victoria in terms of introductions? No, Karen. Karen's at the bottom. Okay, just give me a second.
No, it's fine. We're starting. Okay. You won't be able to hear anything while we start up to go live, but we're going live right now, and I gotta close our mics so that we're not discussing each other, and we're starting up. So.
Welcome, everyone. By beginning on the territorial to acknowledge the Algonquin Nation, in which we're gathering this afternoon, and a special welcome from the Idea Connector studio in Ottawa. Welcome here to our online panelists and audience from across Canada. We invite our online audience to make use of the chat function on the top right-hand corner of their screen to submit their thoughts on the questions that are being discussed by the panelists, and also to submit their own questions. Later during our dialogue, we will take time and ask our panelists to share their thoughts on their questions. Suggestions and comments on our topics are also most welcomed. Our online panelists are entrepreneurs in their own right. First, from Edmonton, Alberta, we have Karen McKenzie, who is a proud Cree Métis woman and the co-founder and president of Macintosh Canada, an Indigenous-owned international consulting company. Business ownership, along with academic and senior management positions, has led Karen to this important crossroads in our collective societies where co-creation of the future is both important and enabling. Next we go from Ohsquegan, Ontario, Tuesday Johnson McDonald. She founded and owns TAP Resources and Associates, a business delivering diverse conferences that showcase the Indigenous culture. Her company was recently awarded with 2 awards for Best Conference in 2017. The Canadian Event Society's Best Conference 2017 Award in Canada for the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education. TAP is the first Indigenous event management firm to win this national title. We travel now to the next panelist from Whitby, Ontario, Melanie Martin, who is the founder of the WebBright Design Solutions, a website design and development company. She has well-rounded business background within small businesses and enterprise organizations, as well as over 17 years of experience in sales and online marketing. She speaks at the conferences throughout Canada on building a foundation of marketing knowledge. Melanie is Anishinaabe. Her First Nation is Thessalon, located along the north shore of Ontario. Melanie is a Makwa clan. From Listegouche, Quebec, we have Victoria Labillois. A Mi'kmaq entrepreneur, Victoria owns Wepajek Excavation, owns rental properties, co-owns Wesajek Construction, and is an active partner in other ventures. Victoria served the Indigenous public service, working at the band, regional, and national levels. And now I'll introduce in our studio is David Harries, foresight practitioner that resides in Kingston. Myself as Denise Ann, Anishinaabe Queb, Manitoulin Island, Donjiba, Wolf Clan Mother, member of Garden River First Nation near Sault Ste. Marie and resides in Ottawa, Miigwech. In the next hour and a half, the panelists and the online participants will explore the overarching question: what if a collaborative entrepreneurial ecosystem was created to develop, build capacity, and to provide better support to aspiring Indigenous women, entrepreneurs, and small business owners? In the last week's webinar, the panelists spent most of their time exploring challenges facing Indigenous women who are interested in launching their own small businesses or owners of small businesses. This week, this quote-unquote big question will be explored from an operational perspective. Questions like what, the what's, the why, and how it should deliver services. Today's panel is part of a broader exercise of a dialogue and broad consultations we hope will serve as a framework to help Idea Connector and the Proteus Canada Institute to implement its proposed National Indigenous Women's Entrepreneurial Ecosystem. I will now ask David Harries to explain this dialogue and broad consultation process.
Good morning, good afternoon. Nice to see you back. Melanie, nice to meet you. As you all know, we've been at this now for some months. We did a number of interviews. We've scanned documents and reports. We've had a poll ongoing, finished yesterday. We haven't yet tabulated the results. And as all but Melanie know, we had our presentation and our discussion last week, a week ago today. And we hope to have a report out on these discussions on 11 May. Today's process, virtually the same as last Tuesday. We have 8 questions. We'll spend about 10 minutes on each. And at the end of each question session, I'll try to reflect on what has been said in a foresight context, so looking forward. The questions, again, as last week, are not meant to limit any discussion. If there's a way that you want to take the question further or even discuss consequences of your answers, please do so. I thought to begin, and before turning it over to Nisan for the proceedings, to give a little bit of thought behind our ecosystem wording. Shane, could you put up slide 2? This is about a hub. Hub, by and large, connected to a community or a community region. And the next slide's what a hub contains. Now, these are just beginning documents. So if afterwards, at any time, you have comments on the wording and the description and the definition, please let us know. I'd like to concentrate on this third slide about the ecosystem. So the whole package. Ecosystem contains a network of hubs so that what is gained, learned in one location can be shared, can be exploited in others. And the ecosystem, based on my background in foresight, it's important to realize that the ecosystem is within, so the networks among us and the hubs and so on, but it's also about the external factors, whether it be Canadian politics, climate change, or whatever. We have to take account of all the realities. Denise Ann.
Miigwech, thank you, in Ojibwe. Without further ado, let's now start the process. Panelists, you now have 10 minutes for a dialogue on the following question. If Indigenous women entrepreneurial ecosystem, quote-unquote hubs, were created and selected in urban or rural centers, What would you expect the program to accomplish? I welcome the dialogue and engagement.
Okay, well, I'll start.
You go ahead.
I would expect some energy to be created around people feeling supported, that they were moving in a collective, collaborative way, that they would be excited about moving forward, and that excitement would help bypass some of the challenges and fears that people have. So if you're not feeling self-confident, you have the support with other women and other resources. And I think you're building a community built on trust and respect, so that people feel safe, so that they can engage with all the necessary aspects of launching their business and nurturing their business and growing their business.
Thank you.
For me, I'd want to make sure that there were, I don't know if it's mentors or facilitators, but making sure that everyone's voice is heard and encouraged, because it's through, the voicing, because if you have a number of people at different spectrums of either entering business or delivering a business, running a business, then your comfort level of sharing successes or challenges becomes far more meaningful if everyone's sharing, and sometimes you have to encourage all those voices.
For my part, what I'd like to see are connections. So connections amongst ourselves, amongst the women, connections to resources, financial, people, advice, coaches, mentors. It's just creating this place, and to use Karen's words, that safe space where we connect and share.
The other thing that I'd like to see is making sure that there's targeted networking, that we're not just networking amongst ourselves as businesswomen, as entrepreneurs, and sharing what it is that we're doing with each other, and hopefully developing partnerships and relationships at that level, but also networking with corporations and governments who has a focused interest in doing business with women entrepreneurs.
Can we invite you, Melanie?
Melanie's speaking, Shane, but there's no voice here.
She's muted herself. Her mic is off. I can't do anything about it. Melanie, your mic is off.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes.
Thank you. I pushed the wrong button.
It's okay.
Anyhow, I'd like to just add, I've been listening, and I'd like to add that I'd like to see in a hub, business advisory services, business training, mentoring, and workshops, things that are vital to entrepreneurship, and certainly encouraging growth. Also, entrepreneur funding programs where we can learn how to access, because I remember as I started up, that was one of the issues that I had. I didn't know where to look for funds. I didn't know who I could access. I didn't know what resources were available to me. And then finally, networking opportunities in a safe environment where I'm working with other Aboriginal, Indigenous business owners.
I'd like to add something on that theme of connectivity and connection. Just listening to the other speakers, and when I see a hub, or when I envision a hub, I think of a place where we go where all the tools would be there. So first of all, high-speed internet connection and printers and scanners, just access to computers and up-to-date technology, where we could even participate in online training. And I'm thinking along the theme of workshops that Melanie had mentioned, and specifically thinking about the artisans, the talent that exists in our community. I see so many successful online businesses launched on social media that I think that's an opportunity, given the geography of many of our communities. That's something we could easily tap into and that we could foster or nurture through such a hub.
I also think it's an opportunity and a safe space for the private sector, non-Indigenous businesses, to come and start to build relationships in a very meaningful, respectful way, and so that it's natural to do business with people that you know. So this would be a starting point to start that process. So the whole procurement cycle could have a natural starting point. So rather than giving people forms to fill out and so on, it's starting at the relationship building.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things I would encourage as well, or would really like to see, is that there would be a business mentor or someone to go in and sit and just even hash out an idea for a business and business creation opportunities, and just the ability to have access to other people that are in business or have had successful businesses, I think would really help people come out and identify as Indigenous business. Because I know we're out there. It's just encouraging.
I think one of the other things that I would really like to see too is the creation of masterminds, where you have members from across the nation, so that you're getting different perspectives and introduced to different regions and different communities.
Mm-hmm. Very much.
I was also going to say, I like the idea when Victoria mentioned the high-speed internet, that there would be portals like we have today where people could engage in this, cross Canada conversations about ideas, so that you may find someone who is delivering conferences, we'll say, in either Western or Northern Canada, that could learn from you Tuesday or invite you out to partner, so that all kinds of different innovative and collaborative things could happen.
I like that thought as well, in terms of starting with that hub as we're doing as we speak. Showing that model, taking that step forward, and then just to elaborate into the partnership and relationships. Is there any other few more thoughts that you want to bring forward as we go ahead? So take that wrapping up now in our 10 minutes of our dialogue, and pass it over to David so that he can give us some takeaways from this discussion session.
Well, it's not so much takeaways or summary. It's my reaction, my feelings in response to what you've said. I get, I guess, three reactions. One is the idea of connections among sort of the intellectual resources, the technical resources, and the sort of the heart resources. You talk about a safe space. Some of us, I know there's times even I feel unsafe when I'm faced with a massive technology burden or change or requirement. But if there are the mentors there and the facilitators, the process that you've talked about. So my overall takeaway from your answers, your discussion of this first question, is the connections among the intellectual, the technical, and the hard issues.
You're good, David. As we now move ahead, panelists, you now have 10 minutes to discuss question number 2. If an Indigenous woman ecosystem, quote-unquote, hub, was to be set up in your community, how would you want to make use of it?
Well, I'll raise my hand on that one. And to start, so I could see myself using it as an opportunity to mentor small business, but also participate in mentorship with other business owners, because I think there's always an opportunity to learn. I'd like to participate and learn more in workshops that might be available. And lastly, network with other Indigenous business to see what's going on.
I agree with Melanie. I think those are all important things. The other piece I would like to see is really looking at an opportunity to perhaps share resources with local businesses in my area. I may not need, I don't know, let's say a full-time web, computer technician, but I could share that with somebody. That would help bring, my costs down from whatever.
I was thinking along the same lines Tuesday, and I was thinking like a bookkeeper or legal advice, just having somebody to be able to consult with for advice and guidance like that, and a cost-sharing model. Also, I was thinking, how would I use that resource, echoing Melanie's comments, to be there to provide support, but also to obtain support. And one big thing I was thinking, I'd really like to have access to a boardroom to host some of my meetings. So just having that type of facility, along what Karen was talking about, the procurement path, going down that. So if we're inviting potential partners or clients or customers, that we're meeting in a professional boardroom setting versus my living room.
Nice as it is.
Smelling the salmon I cooked for lunch.
Or the local Starbucks.
And, I was thinking about, there are lots of resources available in this, large urban center, like the Business Link, some of the banks have something that approximate this, but I don't use them. So why would I use this hub? And I think it's because of that social aspect of it. When it's other Indigenous women, there's that bigger sense of, I'm going to say, collaborative learning or collective growth and development in a more meaningful way, as opposed to something that may be, I'll say, more technical. I don't know if I'm clear about that, but I'm looking at it through my own perspective, knowing that some things like this exist, but I tend not to use them. But I know, given the descriptors that we've been just discussing in the last 5 minutes, would draw me to it for more of the social aspect to underpin learning, sharing resources, and so on.
I think, Karen, I totally get what you're saying, because it would be seeing ourselves there and having that sense of belonging instead of a second-class citizen. What are you doing here? That this is where I belong. This is where I fit in. And I think that would go a long way to what we talked about last week, addressing that mentality of scarcity, that there is enough, and we're lifting each other up along the way. We're helping ourselves, but we're also helping others too.
And I think from the mentoring aspect, every woman, wherever she is on the scale of just thinking about a business to being a successful owner that's creating wealth in the community, has something to share. So it's a place where stories can be told, so that I would learn something from, let's say, a 16-year-old young woman who's still in high school who has some ideas, and that might inspire me in an avenue that I hadn't considered. So it's that place where I think that cultural basis of sharing our stories, we're all going to learn.
I think it's a place too where I would want to see always a component of education, whether that's sharing through bringing in a speaker in this type of a format where you're learning about the statistics, or learning having like a broader education on what's happening within government around women's entrepreneurship, or what other, like we're talking about resources, business resources that may be available, but other opportunities that are in research around business that we might not otherwise take the time to investigate ourselves.
I agree. I think that's a good comment, Tuesday. I want to echo what you're saying there. For sure, having the opportunity to also, when you're thinking about going and putting a quote out, but having the opportunity to maybe collaborate with another business owner to see whether or not you're doing it correctly, or having the opportunity to share experiences and knowledge in a safe environment.
It's nice to be building upon that collective community of the sharing, the caring that we're building within our own relationships as we do business, and being able to role model that. So I'd like to continue on. Would like to add on to how we see this place?
Hey, so one of the things that I think we've already said it, but inspiration is, I think, a key to what we want to see in a hub. Not just the inspiration of what's going on in our own local community, but being inspired and hearing stories of other successes that are out there, or even a new startup business, and some of the because there's excitement. There's a lot of hard work, but there's also some excitement on the achievements as we're going, and having to share in that. And being able to encourage them to go on at whatever level that we're at.
Along that theme of inspiration, I was thinking about just the mere presence or existence of an Indigenous women's business hub. What type of role modeling that would do for the young women coming after us, or those who are right now in high school or post-secondary, how we can start planting those seeds of entrepreneurship. Yeah. People need to see that it's working, that there are actually other people that they can relate to, creating businesses, operating businesses, and being successful at it. But also to help stimulate the economy, looking again towards the youth, that perhaps we would inspire summer student businesses, or just along that type of thinking.
I think it's really important as well. Like, I really enjoyed, Karen, the video that you shared with everybody around the ecosystem and the wolves in, what was it, Yellowstone Park. That when I reviewed that, it brought back to my mind, hey, this is how my business, this is how I have helped my community by doing this. I've hired these people. I've been able to introduce that company, and I was able to see that. And I think it's important that we share those stories too, right? And that we're seeing how we are affecting the overall economy, and how we can help other people see how we're affecting the economy. I know certainly when I'm writing proposals, especially to do international conferences, that's what I do. But when we're doing international conferences, when we're writing for sponsorships and grants through whatever city, we have to help them see how we're going to help their city, what the benefit is of us doing what we're doing in their communities. And that's a learned skill to be able to do that on an ongoing basis. And I think it's important for us to see overall too, because it helps us build our own businesses.
Does anyone want to add upon that? As we're moving, because we're hearing about the youth, the engagement, interaction that's necessary, but also on the basis on that shared history of lived experiences and being able to turn that around. And I agree, the skill set to be able to
I get
do
really
that.
excited. I can tell you, I get really excited when I an opportunity to do something like this. Otherwise, I don't think I would have ever met Victoria or Karen or Melanie and have some kind of idea of people that are across the country, and that excites me to see other women that at different stages doing what they do, and knowing that, you know, I'm not alone, sitting in my four corners here.
I think that I agree, Tuesday. It is really important to know that there are other successful Indigenous women out there. And I'll share a really brief story, but when I first moved into the Durham region, I thought I was the only Native in Durham region because there was no opportunity for me to connect. And if I wanted to do any kind of learning opportunities with other Indigenous business, I had to go into Toronto. And for me, that was, you know, an hour's drive to go and connect for an hour and then drive back. So that's taking me out of my business day. So having an opportunity to do something online is, I think, a fabulous idea. The whole idea of the hub is exciting to me, and it's something that I've been waiting for quite some time, and even toying with the idea of developing it myself, because I knew that we exist. It's just, where are they? Where are they? Without having to go to a trade show to see you and then disperse and never see you again, right? So having something that's constantly connecting is really exciting to me.
I think it's important too, because I remember when I was starting out 18 years ago, I was looking for someone to help me too. I was looking for that connection, and I ended up finding two non-Indigenous specific associations to my work area, and I went, and I gotta tell you, the culture shock that I went through when I first went there, it was tough. I was, but I stuck through it because I needed the help. I knew I needed the help. I needed that network. But if there was an Indigenous, particularly a women's Indigenous entrepreneurship association or hub or ecosystem, I would have been jumping on really quickly for sure. And I think even doing the little bit that we've been doing just on the discussion now, learning, kind of making a stronger connection with places like CCAB and NWAC with some of the things that they're doing around businesses and entrepreneurship. Those are all really important resources that we need to share and identify, and giving them an opportunity to come and talk with us as well, and highlighting how they can support our businesses.
And I think that's really important because, last week we talked about silos that exist, particularly in either government or financing programs, and there's no connection there. And so the same thing is, there's lots of different industry associations and Indigenous associations, and we need to be that place where they can all connect. So, I like that comment, Tuesday.
Well done, ladies. So we need to forge ahead on the next question, number 3.
Can I talk?
Oh, sorry, David. I got so inspired. It was all we're going to forge ahead.
Hey, I'm inspired too. That you have described in my view, whether it be Indigenous or non-Indigenous, Canadian or non-Canadian, the reason for having what we're currently calling this hub, it's a place where you can give if you're a mentor, you can gain if you're a young person that comes in and can learn, you can create because you're together and you know more of the resources and things that can help you create, and you can inspire. And the business, the idea of bringing in, having a hub that the young people can come in and listen and learn and become more aware, if I may, that's a very, very heavy foresight power to look ahead. A 16-year-old Indigenous woman who is interested in what you're telling her about, then she is going to start to look forward, and all the awareness that you can give and share her at the hub will be massively important. So again, the hub, give, gain, share, inspire.
Thank you, David. Now we'll proceed on question number 3. You now have 10 minutes, panelists. What were linked together to form our national Indigenous women ecosystem in support of growth and well-being?
I think that's actually an absolute key to designing an ecosystem, that there has to be that national component to it. There's lots of opportunities, certainly in our communities, but even at a national level, just, I don't know, just for the inspiration of it, and understanding the stories and understanding successes and whatever other opportunities that there might be out there. I think that's really important.
Yeah. And I think, just building on what you said, it's allowing people to start dreaming from what's just in front of them to this bigger, broader perspective. And so the dreams get bigger. Mm-hmm. And I think, prosperity will follow, whether you want to call it success or prosperity.
I can see that a national Indigenous women's ecosystem would also give us a stronger voice as Indigenous women when we're facing business problems with the government and so on. But also it gives us an opportunity to go and get some resources available. So software, going into Microsoft and making that available to our businesses, and insurance packages to our business. And we've all seen this in other organizations where they provide this kind of stuff. But wouldn't it be great if we could do that for our people and use our own people who offer those services to maybe put some kind of package together to provide to Indigenous women? I just see this being, it has to absolutely be a connected national level ecosystem for sure. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it follows that concept of the bundled arrows, right? Mm-hmm. One arrow was strong, but with a bundle of arrows, we're that much stronger, and a louder voice.
Yeah.
When I think of the ecosystem, I echo the comments connecting nationally, but I'm thinking for myself, how do I connect across the territory? So across Mi'kma'ki, which is Gaspé, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, I have challenges connecting with other women Mi'kmaq entrepreneurs just across the region or our territory, and starting to spread out from the community to the region, then to the national level. And I'm thinking about specific economic activities that different regions partake. If it's wind development, for existence, out across our territory, thinking about opportunities that we could exploit or expand upon in the resource industry, and then going out nationally. That's just a few of my thoughts happening really fast.
one of the things that I really like about it too, now I'm getting really excited because it's an opportunity for even referrals. You know, we go into different provinces for our conferences all the time, and love to be able to know somebody from an Indigenous community there and be able to say, hey, I'm coming in, I'm looking for this kind of speaker that's in the local area, or I'm looking for this. Is there someone that you would recommend? That would be really, really helpful, because then I'm, again, able to support and possibly source Indigenous service providers that I would not have known of before and would have taken me too long to source. But it also gives me an opportunity to self-promote. Saying, here I am, this is my business, this is what I do, just doing that bit of a sales call and elevator pitches. I love the elevator pitches.
Expanding the Moccasin Telegraph, I call that.
Yeah.
You're out of your hub now.
Yeah, I'm always looking for those new opportunities.
Yeah.
But, again, it's that old quote, an opportunity has to be seen to be seized. And this just broadens our perspective, and we're catching on. And if I hear conference, I can say Tuesday. If I hear wind construction, I know I can start the conversation with Victoria. And now that I know we have a WordPress, IT web designer, all these pieces are, just expanding our own, I'll say, knowledge of who's out there.
And can you vision long-term a conference of all Indigenous women successful? And Tuesday, you can throw that together in a second, I'm sure.
I could. I'm getting really excited about it.
Yeah.
That's what's cooking in the kitchen, right?
There's foresight in action.
I've gone to budget already.
That's funny. But seriously, the opportunity to connect with other business across Canada, how exciting would that be? And knowing that we're doing it, consistently across the provinces, so that we all know what to expect, how to facilitate connections. That's so exciting.
I think and I like that word, Melanie, celebrating, because I think that's a really key thing, is that we need to celebrate not only our own successes, but the successes of others. Again, I know I keep on emphasizing at the different levels, because we have startups, we have meeting runs, and we have businesses who have been operating on a long term, and all of that needs to be celebrated.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll forge ahead, and we'll turn to David to give us a summary as to what he's come up with.
I'm going to go off.
Tuesday, you started off by saying this is key. And for me, in all that I've learned from you and others, I truly believe this is key. And I'll give you my reasons why I think a national system is key. First of all, every single hub is different. Remember last week we said that no one size fits all, because our challenges are different, our local context is different, every province is different. And having a national ecosystem that allows you to get above the differences, whether it's siloing or whether it's our knowledge or whether it's our level of prosperity, would allow all those barriers to be, you could deal with them. I'm not saying they're all going to fall down, but if you have a national system, all the differences can be risen above when you discuss things. And the point about having a conference in the future to celebrate successes, but if I may, also to pass on lessons from failures. One of the things that's always upset me in my world, some years ago, was that there's no such thing as a journal of any sector, of any discipline, of every field on failures. And think of how much has been learned by failures that we have no record of anymore. And if we had this national system and we were safe and trusting each other in our discussions, the amount of learning that could be added to for our futures, I believe, would be incredible. So I think, I go back, yes, it's key. And one of the reasons it's key is we are a very different country in which every hub will be different. And we have to have a way to manage that. And a national ecosystem would help do that.
And just as a comment, we can't forget that we also have 3 territories. And so I'm sure some of them are listening in, some of those participants. And, you know, there are challenges of high-speed internet for our northern sisters and communities. And also, for me, the number 13 is very powerful. So to recognize, you know, 10 provinces and 3 territories, 13 is very significant, I think, for Indigenous women. Yeah. Our 13 moons, our 13 grandmothers, and so on. So there's a narrative stream I see coming out of this. And so the celebration piece and the stories of whether they're successes, failures, challenges are all part of that process.
Yeah, and I do want to correct one of my weaknesses, because when I said provinces, I should have said provinces and territories. I understand. Being someone who's spent a lot of time in the Arctic, I really resonate with your comment.
Miigwech. And thank you, Karen.
Hi.
As we go to the next question, number 4. Panelists, you now have 10 minutes to discuss this one. What do you think selected candidates would expect?
So when I think about selected candidates, I'm thinking that that would be somebody that we would bring into the organization, or they would raise their hand that they have an idea for a business that they'd like to bring forward. Am I on the right track? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Okay. So that candidate would be somebody that I could see that, you know, is just thinking about an idea, just has an idea of starting some kind of business, or could also be an existing business that's wanting to grow their business. So I think one of the things that we would we'd expect, or I think they should expect, is some kind of program in place that would take them from start to finish, and then eventually a launch, like a launch party, celebrating their success from and watching them grow and helping them to grow through a network of business leadership.
I think this is a good question, because it forces us to look at managing the expectations of the women who would come to such a hub. And I'm thinking about if somebody has an idea and they're going out and looking for resources, that the hub isn't going to solve all their problems or to do all the work. For instance, if somebody's looking for assistance with a business plan, that they come to the hub and it's not going to be written there for them, or we're not going to develop this network or find all the industry associations, but rather put them on the path and share our stories of how we went about doing it, kind of modeling the type of behavior versus I'm here, I don't want to use that old expression, I'm here with the government, I'm here to help you. It's not going to be done for you, but we're going to walk with you on that path or on your journey. So again, managing expectations that you're not going to show up one morning with a business idea and boom, everyone's going to take and run the idea for you, but rather walk on that path with you.
And I think we also need to recognize that the courage that people have to actually come to the hub, and that part of the process will be their own growth and development, developing that self-confidence, developing resiliency, learning how to ask for help, and learning, I think, and learning how to ask questions and how to engage with mentors and so on. So there's the resources that are out there, but there's also a process that will help the candidates in their own personal growth.
Yeah, so I think when I was growing up, my mother used to say, I'm going to teach you how to fish so you won't starve. And we've heard that all along, right? Mm-hmm. So I think this is an opportunity to teach people how to develop an idea or move forward from that idea with things that we've had to do in our businesses from the get-go, and that would have been, developing a business plan and developing a strategic plan, your mission and your vision statement, and why those are significant in your business. Not doing it for them at all, but just advising on the process for the person that's raised their hand and said they need some help. That's what I would think that a selected candidate would be interested in certainly part of the process anyways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Having a sounding board. I mean, if you're working in your business alone and you're starting it up, sometimes you need that sounding board. I'm thinking of doing this, and here's what I'm thinking about, and just having someone just to help explore and help you sort out your thinking about where you want to go.
Having a mother saying, "Are you crazy? What are you thinking about? Do you know what you're doing?" Do you know how much work's involved in that?
I think the attraction of bringing in people who are also going to mentor, what they can bring to the table. That's a piece that we can't forget, is bringing in those senior entrepreneurs who have their own stories.
Okay, shall we move ahead? David, would you like to summarize, please?
As we went through your points there, I began to list at the bottom of the page here. I heard about the expectations, and I don't know whether you'd agree with this, but I see the expectations are going to be a mix of education and training and experiential discussion. And I particularly like turning the question a little bit on its head. Selected candidates should know that the people they will be working with and helped by will also have been properly selected, so that whether it's the education or the training or the experiential stories can be presented in a meaningful, respectful way. Am I online? Am I misstepping here?
No, I agree. 100%.
Okay.
You have to have somebody that's going to be able that wants to be part of the program, that has the experience and the qualities and qualifications to provide that information to selected candidates.
And giving good information from a good place.
Yes.
Exactly. I was thinking of an example, a young woman that I know, we were talking about mentoring, and I said, what would you want in a mentor? And she said, I really want to learn about how to write policy. And my initial thought was, you're joking, because that would be something I'd want to run from. But she said, where I work, she said, decisions always say what's in the policy manual and so on. So she said, I want to know how it gets there. So, I called someone who works for Alberta Education in policy. She's an Indigenous woman. We met for coffee. This woman came with, 2 big binders, 3-ring binders, and I could see this young woman's eyes just light up. And I thought, wow, so she was clear about what she needed and wanted, at least as a starting point. And then I think to reflect on what you said, Melanie, to bring the right person in, and then it was a good match. And these 2 people still meet regularly for coffee. I would say this is going on 3 years now. So again, their little network has developed. So, when you said that piece, that's the story that came to my mind. And so it's helping our candidates clarify what they want too. Not to walk in the door and say, there's all these people that are going to help me.
Yeah.
I like that. Hook me up with a young lady that wanted to learn how to write policy, because I'll get her to come and help me write some policy.
Exactly.
I love the inspiration as we continue on.
My question, Karen, was after the young lady saw those 2 great big binders that she didn't change her mind.
No, I said their eyes just lit up, and I thought, I'll buy the coffee and I'll quietly slip away.
And she wouldn't notice that you've left. Well done, Karen. Panelists, now we need to move ahead. We have 10 minutes to discuss question number 5. What best practices promote mutual among Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples who share an interest in launching businesses and doing commerce?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yes, I'd love to. What best practices would promote better mutual understanding among Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples who share an interest in launching businesses and doing commerce?
So when I think about my own company, I think about referring back always to my vision and mission statement and making sure that everything that I do follows my value statement, my mission statement, and so whether or not I'm going to work. So I think that is something that has to be developed early on to determine how we're going to work with non-Indigenous business and what that's going to look like for us as an organization, and how do we bring them into the fold.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to take that one a little step further, or ask the question, how does an Indigenous business and a non-Indigenous company get to the point where they realize they share values and can work together?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an important conversation to have as well. I really like that core, because I think a lot of business startups, they're just hungry for customers
Mm-hmm.
and a revenue stream.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a level of maturity to say yes or no, according to their values.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the question from a partnership or joint venture lens, and I'm thinking about some of my experiences that those cannot come about on the eve of a major project. That I guess some of the best practices would be starting with that relationship building, getting to know who's on the landscape and getting to know each other. And then that speaks to, do we share the same values? Is that a company I'd like to work with or align myself with? Do they match my values? Do they try to get to know the Indigenous community? And there's a reciprocity there. So it can't be all on our side, say from within the community looking outwards, but looking right across the territory and have non-Indigenous businesses completing that due diligence process. Again, not at the 11th hour before a project is going to break ground, but long before that's going to happen. Getting to know the labor force, getting to know the entrepreneurs, getting to know the landscape, what exists in our communities. And I find that severely, severely lacking in my experience here in Gaspésie.
I think the other thing I feel is when you're working with non-Indigenous business, is their confidence level in working with Indigenous business and making sure that we bring to the table what's required to work with non-Indigenous, or the perception of us when we come to the table, so that the qualifications are there, and that so that we can stand proud and know that we tick, got that, tick, got that, tick, got that. Now what's the reason? Right? Because I as an early on, that I started in a non-Indigenous. I tell you, I prefer to work Indigenous. With Indigenous business, but that's been a tough road to hoe, for sure. But working in a non-Indigenous, and I know it's different from my industry, it's making sure that they see that I'm qualified just like everyone else. There's no reason not to use my services. I think
we have to be twice as qualified before we're even considered. Really.
So that's a wall or a barrier that we need to break down. Don't you think? I think so.
Kick it down.
Kick it down. Yeah.
I love the energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess there's also, changing the language, and the word best practices assumes there's something up there. And I know in our communities, there's an evolution towards the word wise practices, so that they are, good in this situation, but maybe it isn't one size that fits all. So it might be industry specific, it might be different kinds of joint ventures or different kinds of partnerships, whether they're community, subcontracting, all kinds of things. So, that term wise practice is less hierarchical or judgmental. Just food for thought.
I think having a frank discussion too about what are the values that we bring to the table. And I'll use an example. We'll use it construction. So our mission is to integrate Mi'kmaq skilled human resources into off-reserve projects. That's critical. So Wet'suwet'en construction is not all about the bottom. It's integrating our people into projects where they haven't had access before. So it's breaking new ground. But when that point is understood, when I come out swinging a big stick saying, these are the people that we have that are going to be part of this labor force, it's better understood. This is the mission of the company.
Mm-hmm.
And I think following that thread, and it's to learn about how does Indigenous business measure success, prosperity. So there's the return on investment, that financial piece, but there's also the family community piece, and then there's also the environmental piece. So that it's not, it is linked to the values, but it's not just one bottom line. It's many bottom lines.
I think there's a piece in there too, and when we talk about reciprocity, but it has to be on a broader perspective around for future development, because if we are the fastest growing population here in Canada, and if we're not working with our entrepreneurs now and helping build that capacity, and those that are falling behind us and helping them build their capacity, then who's going to be there? Who's going to have built that experience and those skills to continue on, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else want to add? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I think there's that education piece for non-Indigenous business that, you know, that Indigenous business is not seen to be just an end, that we need this partnership in order to do this bigger project, etc. But if we want to talk about the calls to action in the Truth and Reconciliation, it's about learning, it's about education and learning about Indigenous peoples and so on. It's not a narrow lens anymore, that it's a much broader lens. And I think that's fundamental to how, I'm going to say, business is conducted.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other comments that we want to add on best practices, or to build up on that understanding between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples? But I like the idea that we can maybe have your experience with the Truth and Reconciliation in that business segment of the 94 calls, or your own experience that you want to add to that, linked to the wise practices that we're now creating from business.
I think there's a piece that CCAB is doing, and the work they're doing to bring corporations forward, and the certification levels that they're encouraging those corporations to do or receive as they are incorporating more Indigenous business in contracts. Mm-hmm. That's a promising practice or wise practice that I think that really needs to be looked at and incorporated into what this network or hub ecosystem plans to do moving forward.
And that speaks to preparing the corporate culture of the non-Indigenous business to be less racist, less sexist, and how is the team below the management level view the Indigenous community or Indigenous entrepreneurs or Indigenous workers, because at the end of the day, that's who you're going to be face to face with, working together.
Yeah. Okay, David, I'll leave it with you to bring us forward on the summary.
Karen, I'm glad you brought up the issue of education, because there's no doubt at all, for reasons some of which I expressed at our last discussion about Canada's bifurcated, fragmented education system, that there's a lot more learning than non-Indigenous people have to do, and not only about Indigenous people, even about themselves in this country. So somehow or other, hopefully, the education system will move into the 21st century, into the Canadian 21st century. Make a recommendation. John Ruggie was made a special representative to the Secretary General of the United Nations, and over a period of years he and a very eminent team produced a report that the United Nations unanimously accepted on business and human rights, a set of principles. And I recommend, whenever you have time, this isn't something you need tomorrow or the next day, but Google John Ruggie, Ruggie, his report. I think it was tabled in 2008. Seems a long time ago now, but it's almost timeless. And another idea that you provoked my memory of was living in Asia. I learned very painfully for my first year there that there was absolutely no sense trying to do business at any level before you build a relationship with the people that you wanted to do business with. I mean, I wasn't hurled out of offices, but the second time I went to a very large Asian corporation for a meeting that they called me to and set the time of and set the duration of, and when I arrived there was nobody there and they could see I was upset. In other words, I blew it because they hadn't quite got a relationship with me that they were willing to all turn up when they said they'd be there. And this was totally against anything I'd ever known before. So I did not learn quick enough about the importance of a relationship going forward to a business relationship.
Thank you, David. Now, panelists, you now have 10 more minutes to discuss question number 6. How important are ways and means of penetrating the marketplace and generating revenues in the early stages of the startup?
I'm not quite sure of the question, but I'm going to base it on what David just described. And so when you start your business, are we assuming, or should we talk about the importance of having those relationships before you officially launch? Or you're launching and now the first step is building relationships, okay, and that will have some bearing on how those revenues are generated. So what I mean is there's a lot of, I'll say, active marketing that's going to happen that's going to be very expense driven before the revenue starts to come in. So for me, I'm going to overlay it with generating cash flow. And I don't have an answer, but yes, we need to start generating revenue. And I think that's an important part that we need to talk about for our women when they come in to start business. Like, when do you expect to start generating revenue?
When I listen to this question, the first thing that comes to my mind is that it's of critical importance. That's the question. The awareness. So these answers are going to come about when you're drafting the business plan, not as you're running the business. And when I coach people about a business plan, because some people mistake it to be like a master's thesis, a business plan is your time to think. It's the luxury of time to think about your business idea. So of course it would include a marketing strategy, a marketing plan. What are those ways and means that you're going to attract business from this particular market? How are you going to insert yourself into this market? So that's the thinking that goes into the plan and includes actionable items and steps that you would do. As for the second part of the question, generating revenues, you're drafting cash flow statements and pro formas to be able to start asking this question. There's no get rich quick. You're going to sink a lot of money into your business at the front end. And when can you start to see that return? And can you sustain yourself? Do you have the working capital to sustain yourself until you get to that point? And it's not going to be some huge number. It's going to start small and grow. So can you sustain yourself based on your projections on what you're seeing. So again, it's thinking and taking that time to polish your thoughts and problem solve before situations happen. Because when you're running your business, time, I know ladies, we just don't have time. So you need to think that out beforehand. And that's the thinking that goes into the business plan.
I agree. I think it's extremely important to have that awareness, but there's also the recognition that there's always a learning curve. You know, you're only, especially in a startup, you're only able to absorb so much. And of what you're absorbing, if you don't have the experience to really measure that awareness and how much value you're putting on it yourself, it's those things you can't lose sight of. But certainly in an ecosystem that we're talking about and creating these hubs, this is one of the advantages, I think, and opportunities that we make available in helping those new entrepreneurs and startup businesses, because these are things that, you know, those senior entrepreneurs are able to help with. But you can't take away that learning curve from individuals. You can certainly help increase their awareness as much as you want, but there is a learning curve, and just even identifying that is important.
Yeah, I have to agree with all of you that, you know, creating a strategic plan that's going to set a clear path to cash for you, or a guided path to your cash, knowing what your product and services are, and knowing exactly who you are as a company, and how you're going to work and create those opportunities for yourself. I think ages and years, if they're not aware of, if you're not aware whether or not another company needs your services because you haven't done the homework before and what exactly your services are, then you're just barking up the wrong tree. You're wasting your time and their time. So, you know, doing the strategic plan, knowing exactly who your funnel is or who your silo is, and whether or not that person needs your services. Think about it yourself. When somebody calls you and asks you if you're, you know, are you, like, people always ask me, I constantly get phone calls for collection services. Well, I don't work with companies that don't have money. And that's a pre-qualifier before we start. And I certainly don't work with businesses that are going to be, you know, they're writing me checks. They're not putting it on a Visa card. So I, you know, I see that as a phone call where where it's an easy phone call for them to call me because they've been told to get on the phone and put a call in and try and generate some business, but not really clearly thinking about who it is that they're going to contact for their services, right? So I really think that, you know, in the early stages, it's the strategic plan, it's the business plan, it's knowing what your business is and who your target audience is going to be, and that has to be clearly laid out. And I call it my path to cash. That's, you know, and the quickest one for me. How's that going to get there? How am I going to get there? So there's research. There's research long before I even go out and introduce that.
I think it's important too to build the awareness when we're talking about generating revenues in the early stages, that there's the necessity to make sure there's an awareness of around generating revenues and profit lines and reinvestment into your company to make it stronger. So the point that Victoria made around making sure that you have the resources or the plan on how you're going to sustain your own livelihood as you are building that business, because you do need to reinvest back into the company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Along that same thought, when you were talking to us today, I was thinking, if there was a hub available, just having somebody explain what a billing cycle is and how it varies industry to industry, a 30, 60, 90-day billing, that's impacting your capacity to generate revenue.
One of the things that shocked me just recently was that a lot of business don't know how to read their income statements, their accounts receivables, their account payables. They're not aware of the books, and so I think that's a huge learning curve, and that was something that I admittedly didn't really start looking at my books and know what was really going on with the numbers until, I'd been in business 6 years, and I thought, well, I better look at these things to see whether or not I'm wasting my time, or who am I going after? Maybe I'm going after the wrong people. So, that experience certainly gave me the opportunity to look at who I was focusing on and whether or not I needed to change that. So, again, business planning, strategic plans, all those things have to be in play for startup businesses, and that's early on in it. It's certainly overwhelming. I get that, and so, at what point do we introduce it? And I think the hub is something that's, if that resource is available and that it's well known to Indigenous startups, that there's an opportunity for them to grow and be more successful.
Mm-hmm. And I guess part of what I'm hearing, and my imagination is jumping around, is really about learning the language of business. And not, as a sell kind of thing that here's the things you need to know, but just hearing the conversation where words like working capital, marketing strategy, billing cycle become part of your own understanding, and you think, oh, maybe I should look at that with regards to my own business. So it's that. It's almost learning that new language, the language of entrepreneurship, and becoming comfortable with it. So I think of it in terms of a more, I'll say, classic, course that you might take on writing a business plan. It's very staged and it's powerful, but then there's a way that you want to have some time to reflect and just get used to the language. So whether that's through a mentor or through some of these networking cycles, etc. So I don't have an answer, but it's sparked my imagination about the words. And I think, Melanie, I had said to you early on when we were just chatting, part of it came to me when I was starting my business and I was working in a community. And, there was, a resource company talking about community benefits and so on. And an elder asked me, what's a strategy? And I said, you know what? that was a bit of an aha moment for me, when people don't understand and yet they're making decisions without that knowledge.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's going to be an important part of an ecosystem, and it's making sure, again, we're going back to education, right? Around financial literacy and having those experts that are there that are starting to talk about that. I mean, it's certainly up to the entrepreneur to look for the opportunities and build their own business, but helping, because you don't know what you don't know. And
right.
The ecosystem certainly can help highlight some of those areas that people can start being encouraged to understand and start building into.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, miigwech, ladies. Can I turn it over to you, David?
I found this one of the most interesting parts of our time together so far. Tuesday, I think you said it's always a learning curve. And learning by yourself is much more difficult than learning with others.
Yeah.
In fact, if you're only learning with yourself, you never know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And the issue of strategy in foresight, one of the things I find again and again and again, there are a lot of organizations, whether it's in business or security or not-for-profits, who have a wonderful strategy, but it was written 6 years ago, and the criteria for that strategy has never been updated. And it's one of the reasons I try to force people that I work with and help to think about strategizing so that it's a verb and not a noun, so that the criteria are always being watched for your strategy. And of course, that will reflect on your mission, your vision, and hopefully be informed by your values. So, learning the language of business, the question, your adjustment of it, Karen, at the beginning was very welcome. This mentoring system has got to get into place early. So if anything's going to be early, even for the most interested and inspired and creative individual, the sooner she can have access to a good relationship with a good mentor, the better.
Agreed.
Excuse me. Thank you. Okay, panelists, now we go on to question number 7, and we have 10 minutes. Appropriate selection criteria are crucial. What should these criteria contain? For example, personal determination, education, resource support.
So when we're talking, when we're talking about selection criteria for members to belong to the ecosystem?
Selection criteria for those who we select to join the hub, to be provided membership in the hub. Now, I had a bit of a runaround with myself because remember early on we had the question about the word selection again, and I wondered the order to put these in. But when we go out, the program is established to create the ecosystem. We are going to have a publishable list so that people will know first that they can apply and what they need to apply successfully. So does that a help?
I'm having a hard time with this question.
Me too.
Because the selected criteria or selection criteria, I'm reading into it exclusion. And I think Indigenous women, we're already, we see enough of that if we're going to develop a model, I wouldn't want to perpetuate anything. I would look at participation in terms of preparedness versus perhaps some of those other suggested items. I'm struggling.
I appreciate it. And I guess I'm really, really pleased. This is the first we've had to struggle with. Victoria, how would you define preparedness then? I mean, I absolutely take your point about exclusion, and we don't want to do that. That's the reason we're trying to define a list that is, in our hearts, non-exclusive, that anybody that wishes to apply can apply. And here are the list of things that will make you more applicable or more likely to be in the first cohort or whatever. How do you define preparedness?
Looking at looking for an entrepreneurial mindset that perhaps has been polishing a business idea or running a business on a micro level, just prepared to take the leap into entrepreneurship. And that's just thinking very quickly off the top of my head.
I think sorry.
Over to you, Tuesday.
Okay, sorry. I'm just trying to think of the associations that I currently belong to, and the selection criteria really is I agree. I'm thrown with the terminology, but we look at our mandate. What is the mandate of the association, and what we're trying to accomplish with that association? So, who's ever wanting to come into that system, there has to be some commonalities. And for a female entrepreneurship ecosystem, I think you got two of those criteria, one being a female Indigenous person, being an entrepreneur, whether that is at a micro or macro level, or someone who's interested in becoming an entrepreneur. Passion for me right away, passion for whatever concept of business that you want to jump into. I think however you measure that, I don't know, but I think that passion is really key, because that's what's helping you get through the tough times of being an entrepreneur in that startup process. Whether that, I guess that could be redefined around personal determination that you have on this list here. But it's got to be, I think it's got to be all encompassing. And when I say all encompassing, I mean those startups, those long-term senior entrepreneurs. You know, I don't want to, and different levels of successes, because everybody brings in different experiences, and it's those differing experiences that we all grow with and grow from.
Yeah, I was looking at it, you know, again, the language, and it felt exclusive. There was that exclusionary piece. So to flip it around, it's how do we invite people into the hub? And I was thinking of it beyond just potential candidates, but to invite potential mentors, to invite potential partners, whether they be from the private sector, who, you know, are very interested in this new community. So again, it's by invitation. So a lot of it's going to be based on relationships of key people in key areas, I think, to start inviting, because, you know, a poster or something out there, you know, that you get via email or Facebook or whatever, you still have to make that leap. So if it's that invitation piece, you know, why should I do this? So Tuesday, when you were talking about your association, you were actively seeking something that could assist you. And I think in this case, maybe some of these women don't know that this is what they're seeking yet. And so it's kind of that invitation to start a journey together.
I think too, because I'm looking at the question and the word of education, I think we have to be really careful with that terminology, because there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there and a lot of successful people out there. And whether I'm reading, when I say education, formal education, because there's a lot of successful people out there that doesn't necessarily have that formal education. So that I wouldn't want to see that limit us. I don't want to see it be an exclusive point to those who have the education and those who don't have the education.
It's a fair point.
I'll ask a question. If we are able to put together the poster that Karen mentions, that is the invitation. And I do like the idea. And we get 500 people replying. What do we do? That was part of my sort of underlying reason for selection. I mean, if we are oversubscribed, how do we manage oversubscription? Because one of the things that we have talked about, and I've been really, really big on all my life, is that those I want to be with and do help and everything, I want to make sure that everything possible is done to help them as much as possible. And you've all been in a lecture hall, I'm sure, with 500 people, and then the question period comes, and there may be 2 questions answered, and nobody else is able to do it. It's just a numbers thing. So how do we manage the invitation process?
Well, I guess, again, maybe it's a series of asking questions. Are you this? Do you have? Do you want? What's your dream? And so on. So that you help people get an idea of what this is about, but also to help them maybe take that next step, that self-selection.
Yeah.
I think it would be a good problem to have if we had 500 people show up.
Yeah, took the words out of. I thought I can't say that.
I know you guys are thinking it, so I'm going to say it. But going back to some of our earlier discussion when we talked about managing expectations, what do women want from this hub? What we're talking about is helping Indigenous women help themselves. So if we have 500 women subscribe, it shows us we have 500 women looking for help to help themselves. So going back to Karen's point, what exactly is it you want? There's different levels, if I could use the word intervention, from financial literacy to help with perhaps marketing strategy or understanding. There's a whole spectrum. So not thinking that everybody's at the same exact place, but individualize or customizing what we're doing. When we talked about a national hub, we talked about the differences across the territories and across the provinces. So taking all of that into account, it's not one size fits all.
Yeah, no, saying all of that, certainly when you ask questions of people that are interested in joining this group of women, what is the level of membership that they're willing to join in on? Are they going to be mentors? Are they going to be so almost what's their interest in being part of this? So are they looking for just simply the networking opportunities, or are they willing to offer some learning workshops, that kind of stuff? And then that would determine how I think would help to determine what each level of membership they would want in this. So almost having the person applying to determine how involved they want to be, and then that would determine whether or not we need any more mentors. And if you're just wanting to do networking opportunities rather than, although I'm just speaking out loud here of things that I've seen happening when I've been part of specific organizations, like the local chambers and that kind of stuff. If you don't go out, there's nothing to be gained from that. So certainly being part of this hub, I think we almost need to have pre-qualifiers for sure, but not qualifiers in how successful you are, but qualifiers in how are you going to help? What are you going to do? And how is this going to work for you? So yeah, I guess there is an application process.
I think for me, the word that keeps on jumping out at me is balance. That there's a balance in the representation there, right? Is that you need the senior entrepreneurs, you need the startups, you need people who are willing to be mentors. There's that if you're looking at the full picture, there has to be a balance of all of those different individuals, I guess, of who's going to help accomplish the mandate or the goal of setting up an ecosystem.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also think there's a kind of a co-creation element of it, because not every hub will be like another one, depending on the location. So it's important to bring in, I'm going to say, a spectrum of people who can help, I'll say, maybe define what it should look like in a particular area. So if there was a remote community versus a larger urban center versus a smaller, center, I think each one, we have to have a process where they can get to what this hub is best suited to do given the local population.
I tend to agree with Victoria. I think if we got 500 people, that's a great problem to have.
I think so.
If it's a problem, I mean, it might be a problem if you get 500 people from one community, but not if you get 500 people from across the nation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But no, 500 applications would be great, but somehow we have to manage that 500 application process, even if every application is accepted. And the process we're looking for is a couple of hubs so that we can learn as we go along about how to do this. And choosing where the hubs, the first 1 or 2 or 3 hubs is going to be, and each of them, as we've said, is going to be different with applications from people with different wishes and requirements and needs. So, I mean, we're not going to solve this question today, obviously, but I certainly ask on behalf of all of us that think about this. Selection criteria, we'll get rid of that word. How do we manage the invitation process? We use that as a new question going forward. How do we manage an invitation process?
Is this going to be, are the hubs going to be fee-based memberships? Has that been determined, Jeff?
No, we're looking at the whole money process, and we're looking for support here in this city, and we are marching out into the corporate world, and we're hoping that the communities that have the hubs will help. As we've said a number of times, there's always many ways to solve a problem. Some won't work, but every one of them can be asked. So we're in the early stages, but for certain, we can't race off and create 10 hubs, which in their own right would be an ecosystem right at the start. I'm not going to say we're going to start small, because hopefully the first hub will be big progress. But how do we create and manage the invitation process?
Okay. Thank you, David. Now we turn to question number 8. With 10 minutes on this dialogue, panelists, how could the ongoing evaluation of participants' performance fairly reflect their non-programmed life challenges?
I'm laughing because I don't know what that means.
Don't be honest. Question mark.
I will admit that this was a mealy-mouthed attempt to provide a question addressing realities. I can imagine we will have responses to an invitation from Indigenous women who have massive life challenges, whether they're family issues, whether they're community issues, whether they're distance issues, whether they're whatever, whether they're a lack of training, education issues. We in no way wish to make that part of the selection process. But if the program in one of these hubs for the invited participants takes a number of months to carry out and complete, and one or more of the participants has whether it's a ongoing or sudden or unexpected family challenge, there would be a point at which they and the system, whether it's the ecosystem or the hub or the community, decide that perhaps she leave or she takes the next program or whatever. So it's a case of, in a respectful and helpful way, managing evaluation, which tends to be a very hard concept, in ways that reflect the realities of the participants. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
I
So
struggle.
why didn't you just ask the question like that?
Well, because that was about a paragraph and a half.
I know.
and words matter.
That was the last panel. Words matter.
Yeah, no, we
make
pointed
the
this out a
connections.
number of times today, too.
I think you have entrepreneurial programs, and they exist all over the world. But we'll just say in Canada, whether they're at post-secondary or financial institutions offer them, and so on. And really, the only metric that I typically see is how many started and how many how many were completed and how many businesses were actually started. And so some of the life challenges, balances, I think a hub can support women in this. I don't think we I don't know that we want to say, how do you reflect it, other than to say, we'll say 15 women started within a year. There were 5 startups. Within 18 months, there were maybe another 2, and some are still in the development phase. I don't, without digging deeper or having to tell people's life challenges. I think for me, the hub, the ecosystem, is that ongoing support.
I agree with you, Karen, on the metrics. We need to be looking at the number of startups or product development or launches of actual businesses. That's what we're trying to promote. So looking at life challenges, my personal advice, having launched my own businesses, that it involves significant investment of your time, your energy, your money. You're going to put a lot of your own money into this before you see anything back. And there's opportunity costs there too. So while you're launching your business, you're not working to earn a salary or a wage. You're sacrificing time away from your family. So you need to explore that right at the beginning. And I guess to answer from the previous question, you said, what does preparedness look like? This is one of those, or 2 of those elements that you need to look at. Investment, time, money, energy, time away from your family, earning, working. It's huge. And launching a business is not for everybody. If you're risk averse in any way, this is not your calling.
Isn't that what they call resilience?
Yeah. Yeah.
Life happens
Yeah, but I think
every day.
yeah.
I think people, yeah, you're right. I think that people think of a business and, oh, it sounds like a great idea, and, oh, I'm going to go down that path, and then the next thing you know, oh, that takes work. I think I'll go get a job.
Hey, entrepreneurship is a job.
My definition of a job is just over broke.
Just
It's not job for me. But I enjoy, doing what I do. And I guess I see people, I guess the metrics again are who are startups and who are business growth, and we need to decide what those metrics are going to be, and then we just have to take the numbers through it, and if life challenges got in the way of somebody's finishing the program or dropping out of the hub, then so be it. That's the reason. I guess maybe an exit strategy too, an exit evaluation form. Why did you leave? That certainly will give us some information, quality information, if we can get them to fill it out.
But didn't we talk about that in the first call around personal and professional development is part and parcel to being an entrepreneur, and now we're talking about evaluating whether that what I would call personal development, how that affects whether you should be in the hub or not. How do you balance that?
Okay, so what do we do I know culturally, as Indigenous women, we look to our grandmothers and ask our grandmothers, how should we handle this? And so is that, are we going to have that level of professional or personal assistance development for an entrepreneur? Is the hub going to have that?
Or that's something to put out in terms of what Karen had introduced earlier about the 13 grandmothers. Given across our territories, it may be an element of continuity coming through.
Yeah.
In a community, I'd support something like that. In a community with a hub, absolutely. And I guess, who was it that said earlier, you, Karen, somebody came to you and wanted to know about a certain type of job, and you did, and your mother said, "Are you crazy?" What if the grandmother says, "Are you crazy?" I mean, that's just a reality. The evaluation, again, it's a very hard standard English term, and usually it means up or out, or stay in or get out. And I don't mean that. I'm trying to think of a way, if a program took 10 months or 12 months, and at the 6-month point, a participant withdrew. Now, I'm not going to say had to withdraw, just withdrew. What does the hub do? And I know we can't answer this today, but that's the sort of question we're looking at here, especially because in a given hub, I'm afraid, although I love your enthusiasm for 500, we can't have a hub with 500 people participating. So
there's the gauntlet thrown down.
Well,
I guess for me, maybe we add to the metrics, because some women may decide that this is, now that I've had time to do research and develop a business plan, this is not looking like a high probability, but maybe what I have learned here is going to help me in a leadership role somewhere else, whether it's in community or political leadership or taking a job that's not just above poverty, but taking a significant leadership role where they can leverage all the resources that they have met, whether it's people or knowledge in the hub, that's going to assist them in the next step in their life. And it's not, business ownership, it's something else. Mm-hmm. So I think that might also be a metric where you talk about when people decide that they're going to not pursue the business startup, but they're going to now take what they've learned and leverage it into something else in their professional life.
I like that idea.
Okay, we're coming to an end, and David would like to summarize.
Well, I had my share of time in this discussion. I think this is, it could almost be called an overarching question because it affects everything. It will impact on an ecosystem, a national ecosystem, because obviously the manner in which a participant's performance was looked at in one hub would be known in the other hubs, and hopefully the ecosystem would have some as a system would have some input into how these activities are addressed. If the ecosystem is to support all the hubs, and all the hubs are to be very supportive of the people that are participating in them, I think we've said a number of times there's got to be some common factors here, and one is fairness.
Miigwech. This is the end of our panel discussion. However, there are a number of questions from the audience, and for the next 15 minutes, I will invite the panelists to comment. And our many thanks to you, the panelists, and the viewers. All those that have registered as participants, you will be receiving in the next 24 hours access to today's panel discussions, along with the capacity to ask questions, comments, or make suggestions. If you share thoughts with us, we will review all the material received, and some will likely be integrated in our framework report to be published on May 11th. Miigwech, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you again. Bamapi Guapman.